Hey, so I've been thinking about finance and how my understanding of money from the age of 13 as a teenager to the age of almost 30 now, that I'm going to be in a few months, has radically changed. I grew up in a world where money was about luxury and spending and social status and signaling young guys trying to impress girls with you know fancy coffee dates at fancy coffee shops. Cafe coffee day back in the day was fancy, then it became Starbucks, then it became fancy cafes and restaurants as we were growing up through junior college and college, and going for fancy vacations. I'm using the word fancy a lot. The reason I do that is very specifically, when I use the word fancy, what I mean is that wealth in the ecosystem that I grew up with was largely about social signaling of, hey, I have money. And if you can see it, that's how you're going to perceive who I am as a person. And that's going to make you want to be like me as well. Because if I have attention and people's admiration based on the signals that I send out with the kind of materialistic possessions that I have, then it is worth being like me. That is what a guy with, whether it was his family's money or his own made money, very few in fact, but in their teens or in the young adulthood, if they had that kind of money, that kind of social signaling did happen. With women it was different. I don't really know how to get into the specifics of it, because I don't think it's fair for me to say how necessarily women socially signal about money. They have their own ways of doing it, but I'm just going to focus on a very general understanding that it was about social signaling. And I thought that if I had money like the other people around me, then I would be more respected, I would be more admired, I would have had more attention. And that is true to a certain extent, where, for example, let's just say after I started working and I buy a pair of shoes, my very first pair of Jordans, okay, which I bought recently in the last 4 or 5 months, and I shared it with a couple of friends that, hey, look, I bought these shoes. And the first understanding or thought process is, oh, I never really got the understanding of why Jordans are so popular. And see, here's the thing, okay? Neither am I a basketball person nor a huge Michael Jordan fan, but I know the legacy of who Michael Jordan is, and what it means to have a pair of Jordans signals to any kid, in America, or how that culture is translated here. And then eventually, outside of the context of basketball and everything that Michael Jordan represents, when the Jordan brand becomes about social signaling, and I have the latest pair of Jordans, whether they cost 100, 200, $400, it becomes about how people view you. And if you have a pair of Jordans, then someone thinks, hey, this guy has a pair of Jordans. And immediately, okay, this guy has money. Whether he made it himself, whether he still stays with his parents, what his financial status is, blah, 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 blah. So from the age of 13 to the age of almost 30, that social perception of how you show what you've paid an effort to earn also is perceived as, hey, this guy has money. If something that I possess signals a certain way in, you know a financial ecosystem. Now here I am for the very first time reading a book on money. I've read mythology, I've read non-fiction about social psychology, largely from Malcolm Gladwell and Devdutt Patnaik, and a few other authors, some fiction, Murakami, etc. But I decided that I would learn more about finance now and understand the patterns behind finance after learning about money being associated with chakras and planets and astrology. This is my I'm really curious about understanding financial patterns, and I can watch as many videos as I want on YouTube. To be very frank about the best books on money, and there were several. One of them was this. It's called The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. I believe I'm pronouncing the name correctly. If I'm not, pardon me. But yeah, so this book largely in the very beginning says that if you made wrong decisions with money in your life, okay, if you have made some wrong decisions with money in your life, it's okay, and you should learn how to forgive yourself, because largely most people in the financial world today The current financial system was developed in the last 20 to 30 to max 50 years, post Second World War largely, especially the way it exists. And if most people are failing at it, and if you happen to be one of them, you're just human. And most financial decisions, strategies, all the policy making, people who are successful, including the Warren Buffett, and there's a brilliant Warren Buffett chapter in there, or like a minor case study understanding, is that 10% or less than 10% of either people or companies or stocks and investors actually succeed with respect to what they do. And it was a very powerful shift for me in the last 2 days, trying to understand that if I wasn't a very smart investor in my 20s, does that make me less viable to become financially successful in the future? And this book says no, that's not necessarily the case, because if you look at it from a generic point of view, yes, if you had started saving money when you were in your 20s, you would maybe have more saved up for the future in a safer manner. But in the context of how maybe one or two bets actually pay off a whole lot more than the other 100 that you make, you could financially blow up at any given point, which is why success and failure are very arbitrary. And the current chapter that I just finished reading says that it's more sensible to be reasonable about your financial decision making rather than rational. A rational mindset would be to consistently save money, make the safest bets, invest in funds that are safe. I don't know the financial technical jargons just as yet, but that's the basic understanding. But here there are case studies and examples even in the first 11, 12 chapters of the book that say that you can do all of those things and still not make a whole lot of money, or you can be extremely greedy, try to go for the big things and win big initially, lose everything maybe 4 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line. So anything can happen. Predicting is still a very reasonable thing to do, is something that I just finished reading in this last chapter called Being Reasonable is Greater Than Being Rational. That predicting the future based on financial systems is still something that is very reasonable to do, because at least it gives a person some kind of basic understanding of how to function when they wake up next morning. And again, see, I've spoken about so many things that I've learned here from a psychological mindset about how people think about money. It's not something that I wasn't aware about before, about how it's about social status and signaling, something that I mentioned at the very beginning. All of those things are also mentioned in this book, that, hey, most people buy and rather spend money, or the idea of wealth and richness is that if I spend a lot of money and people see that, then they will think that I'm rich. This book does address that, something that I referred to in the very beginning, that is the ecosystem that I grew up in. But he says the true wealth is hidden. And the most beautiful astrological insight into this is that we see big wealth in two ways, one of or two out of the several other ways in astrology, which is through the planets connected with Venus, which is Rahu and Ketu. With Rahu you become a millionaire, a multimillionaire. With Ketu you can become a trillionaire. But there's a catch there, a huge catch there. And here it says true wealth is actually hidden. See, with Rahu, it multiplies wealth. So if it's with Venus connected in any manner with Venus, your wealth will get multiplied at some point of time in your life. How, that needs a specific astrology video. But with Ketu reduces everything. It wants you to detach from anything. Once a human being can successfully internally detach from the idea of money, that is where when money actually comes into their life. If they actually chase money, money goes away. Now, I'm just like joining astrology concepts here because I find it really fascinating that someone who's like maybe in the part of the financial world, I have no idea if they have, Morgan Housel. I have no idea if they have any understanding of occult sciences or are even familiar with them. But something that a financial, let's just say, expert or aficionado in this case thinks about money is also true from an occult science point of view. It's just how it comes about to be is a very different thing. So find this really fascinating that I'm learning about money from different perspectives, not just energetically and spiritually and symbolically now, but like psychologically as well. And it's getting mapped onto what I've already learned. So as I approach the age of 30, this is really fascinating for me. And I just wanted to share this with you guys. As I move along, I don't think so I can review this book as a book reviewer. I don't really do that. But yeah, my understanding of like it being correlated to astrology, parts of it in fact, and human behavior, the social psychology that I've already learned about a little bit through my own experiences and through the life that I've lived around me, observations, other books that I've read, is fascinating. So it's really crazy how two worlds that are diametrically at times considered very different from each other, psychology, Western psychology, and Indian Vedic Hinduism and Vedic sciences, astrology, occult, blah blah blah, all of that actually is, there's a correlation here, and the very specific correlation might be actually difficult and even unnecessary to determine, but the fact that there is a link is incredible. And I just wanted to share this with you guys. The more I learn from this book or any other things that I now like learn about, I would love to share them with you. And if you like stayed with me so far, I'm really glad. I think I talk a lot. Rumbling is a word I've learned from Attack of Titan recently, but I really like talking about these things, and I'm so glad that if you made it so far in this video, thank you so much for listening. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.